Well, if you watched our earlier video put out just after FP1 when I was chatting with Mark Slade on Zoom about the only session in which the teams have any chance at all to get the car set up for the sprint weekend, you will not be surprised to see that Max Verstappen is on the pole for the sprint race, exactly as called by Mark. He pointed out, although Max was only 5th quickest on the soft tyre right at the end of FP1, he pointed out that Red Bull had looked very, very organised right from the start and had pushed the car right to the limit. They were running lower perhaps than they would normally have run, but because of the condensed time in which they have to set up the car, they were pushing it really hard. And that's why Max aborted his second run on soft tyres. He was trying to get a second lap out of it. Oscar Piastri did, but because they're running a little bit lower at Red Bull, pushing those limits, he couldn't get the car to work when the tyres had lost a little bit of their grip. So they went into sprint qualifying, 2 sets of mediums. Max was always there, a little bit slower than Lando Norris. Right at the end, Lando was very quick. Indication yet again on the medium tyres we're talking about, indication yet again that the McLaren-Mercedes is a very, very good car with incredibly efficient downforce that works from circuit to circuit. But when it came down to the soft tyres, he stayed in the garage. He was out a little bit later than the McLarens. Perhaps the track was a little bit quicker. More significantly, and this was just pot luck, the wind dropped slightly for Max. It was about 3 kilometers slower. It was the tailwind that Mark Slade had predicted when we spoke on the live stream a couple of days ago. This was the tailwind. It swung around a little bit to the west for about a minute, but generally speaking, it was a tailwind going into the fast S's. But the wind was slightly slower when Max did his lap. Before we look at the stats, I'd just like to say that we often talk about Max on short corners, how detailed he is on slow corners, medium speed corners. We don't often talk about how good this guy is on fast corners as well. So let's have a look at the stats then. Turns 3, 4 and 5, really, really fast. They're flat on the throttle through 3 and 4. Lando Norris through 3 and 4, 281 mid-corner turn 3. 280, dropped 1 kilometer an hour going into turn 4, and then 5 coming out of the throttle, about half throttle down to 266. Max Verstappen on his quickest lap, and you'll notice there that the wind, I've got the wind direction on the west. It did actually change in the middle of his lap, but you can see it at 6.8 compared with 8.6 for Lando. 284 in the middle of turn 3. 284 again in the middle of turn 4, lost no speed whatsoever. I think that is one of the most significant things about Max's lap. We heard at the end of the lap, Laurent Mekies got on to say, brilliant sector 3, Max. For me, this lap was all about sector 1. This part of the lap, this very, very fast section, is sector 1. And look at that, Max didn't lose any speed at all between turn 3 and 4. An indication of how well he's changing direction on the car with the minimum amount of load going through it during that change of direction process. Absolutely superb. Whereas Lando with slightly more, is it longer corners? Of course it's not longer corners, but he's just not finding the same agility of change of direction as Max Verstappen does, and he keeps the car absolutely flat at the perfect moment. And then going into turn 5, 268 for Max Verstappen compared with 266 for Lando Norris. Why is that? Because Lando's backed off to half throttle. Max going through turn 5, he's only taken a quarter of the throttle out. Absolutely brilliant. This was Max Verstappen at his best. Yes, the rest of the lap was excellent as well, particularly sector 3. It's a very detailed sector. There's bumps going into that second last corner as Mark Slade talked about, and also on that second last corner, very easy to go for track limits there. But it's all detailed, pretty standard, short corner, Max Verstappen, brilliant stuff. For me, this was all about this really quick section. Of course, also in sector 1 is that hairpin, the uphill hairpin, as they begin their lap. And Max there, it was kind of interesting to see how many drivers were using the racing line and occasionally missing the apex. George Russell had a bit of a jink going in towards his apex there. Max doesn't worry about the apex there at all, just like the hairpin at Suzuka with Lewis is also doing the same thing. He just focuses 100% on extending the straight, goes down to a very, very slow mid-corner minimum speed, and then he just straight line out of it. There's lots of grip on the outside there, and Max, I don't know why, if you look at Liam Lawson and the way he was driving today, he got into Q2, but then he had a track limits thing. Charles Leclerc was in his eye line a little bit, but he was definitely using unbelievably long corners. You could say, given how long he's making the lap, he's actually going quite quickly. But going in there, he's using a very wide entry. He's going down to his apex. He's lots of corner there where Max is just in an absolute straight line. I don't know why he's not watching the guy that used to be his teammate. Anyway, for me, as I say, it was summed up by what Max was doing through that really quick section. The problem with Kota, as I was saying in the live stream with Mark, and I think he agreed with me, is that as good as that section is, unlike Silverstone, where you're kind of rewarded, yes, you have to go down a gear for the last part of Beckett's, but you're kind of rewarded nonetheless with the long hanger straight afterwards. At Kota, you have to slow down much more, and then you have the downhill run, so you don't really get a reward, but certainly for Max, I think it paid off. That's where he found 1 or 2 tenths over Lando Norris, for sure. Really, really good, really impressive to watch. And the Red Bull, as we've been saying effectively since Monza now, obviously has more efficient downforce as well. Very good on the straight. And Max able to exploit it on the medium and the soft tyre. Full tanks today, yeah, they were full tanks probably. I was talking to Mark Slade in that video. If you haven't seen it, have a look at it. We'll have it here. It's an end screen at the end of this video as well. But I was asking Mark his opinion why on full tanks in free practice earlier in the day, McLaren were doing, if you look at Lando Norris, he was doing 36.8, 36.9, 37.0, 37.8 on with fuel. And Max at the same time was doing 39.4, 39.2, 38.8, 38.7, did more laps with fuel in the car than anybody else, has to be noted. And he said, oh, well, it's just because they were running more fuel than McLaren, which is unusual because most of the year, McLaren and Red Bull have run about the same. Sometimes Red Bull haven't even run full tanks when they've been in trouble, but when they've been running fuel, it's usually been about the same as McLaren, or put another way, McLaren run as much as Red Bull. But here, interesting that McLaren spent more time getting the car set up with less fuel in it, so they had less time to get the fuel in and set the car up for full tanks, and they didn't get as much information as a result. Maybe it's okay for the sprint race, but in terms of information going forward to Sunday, this was not a great day for McLaren, a very, very good day for Red Bull. Let's have a look at the times then. So Max on the pole, 32.1, Lando Norris, 32.2, Oscar Piastri, 32.5. Lando comprehensively quicker than Oscar so far. 1 or 2 moments when Oscar's looked quite good, but Lando, when he's got down to it, has gone quicker than Oscar Piastri. So that's going to be an interesting battle as the weekend picks up traction. Nico Hülkenberg, unbelievable P4. We talked about him in the video with Mark, but really good job, 32.6, same time as, well, just slower than Oscar Piastri in a McLaren. Jonathan Wheatley running that team brilliantly. Touch of the Red Bull there now as well. So really good job by Nico Hülkenberg. I was talking to Mark also about, say, why Bortoleto wasn't up there with him, and he said this is a really difficult circuit for the rookies, and he's right. I mean, if you look at it, the rookies aren't doing particularly well. I don't think it's because, well, driving wise a little bit, but it's also the variables that come into play, particularly the wind. It's quite and the bumps as well. So yeah, interesting to see. It's a lot of the old stages doing well so far in the weekend. I'm sure as we go into the race proper and they do more mileage in the sprint race tomorrow, things will change around, but interesting to see that. Fernando Alonso, 32.9, very quick again early on when the track was green. Not quite as competitive. Looks like Aston Martin getting into their usual thing of falling off, having shown a lot of pace. Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton, really quick at the beginning of free practice today, and Charles Leclerc, no runs at all, and a gearbox problem. Eventually qualified 8.33.0, and Charles Leclerc 33.1. P10, sandwiching Alex Albon in the Williams. Carlos Sainz a little bit quicker, 32.9 than Alex Albon. But what a disappointing day for Ferrari after a pretty aggressive start in free practice. But when it came down to the mediums and then the softs and putting in a time, and Charles Leclerc was right on the bubble in Q1, it didn't look good. He was slightly quicker than Lewis Q2, but Q3, Ferrari not there. As kind of predicted again by Mark Slade, he said the engine should be okay, but if you compound that with the problems that Charles has been having with the gearbox, and also the car just not looking good, not looking sharp at all. And I come back to the comments I was making in the live stream after Singapore, that in my opinion, they seem to have dumbed down the car a bit. Charles just looking like a pretty average racing driver at the moment. Lewis Hamilton a bit more comfortable with the balance and I guess the grip level as a result. But Charles can do not much with that car, and he's not looking particularly special. He needs a much better front end than that, and Ferrari are not giving it to him. So yeah, a disappointing start to the weekend for Ferrari. But Max Verstappen on the pole, ahead of the two McLarens, but it's a really, really short run into that hairpin. Again, this is a classic example of a circuit where I wish they had a rule where the pole winner could decide on which side of the grid he wanted to start. But as it is, it's going to be pretty close, that run into the first corner. Let's see if Lando's as aggressive with Max on his outside, Oscar behind him with more points in the bank going into turn one as he was in Singapore. That'll be worth watching, won't it? Have a look tomorrow. A big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, to TrackNinja and to REC Watches. Big thanks to you too for watching. See you tomorrow.